Under the scorching signature sun of the state of Texas, the air seemed to thicken, not because of humidity, but because of the rich, heavy aroma of hickory and mesquite wood smoke billowing from the pitch-black chimneys of Mama's smokehouse. Tucked awkwardly into a downtown district that was reinventing itself day by day, Martha Higgins' barbecue joint looked like a stubborn historical relic. Around it, glass-wrapped skyscrapers gleamed and luxury condominiums rose like mushrooms after rain. Well-dressed real estate brokers in expensive suits circled the restaurant daily like vultures because they knew exactly one thing: the nearly 1-acre lot, over 4,000 square meters, sitting on this prime corner was valued at up to $5 million on the market. Inside the massive, coal-stained smoker, Martha "Mama" Higgins, a 60-year-old black woman with a full, solid frame and arms as thick and strong as a blacksmith, was laboriously flipping heavy slabs of beef brisket. She had been standing there since 3 a.m. Sweat streamed down her soot-smeared face, but her eyes still burned with pride. For 40 years, her secret barbecue sauce and her 16-hour slow cooking technique had become legend. The line of customers outside, ranging from construction workers to Wall Street executives, was living proof of that. But in stark contrast to Martha's back-breaking labor, inside the family's air-conditioned area was an entirely different picture, a picture of laziness and illusion. Robert, her husband, 65 years old, sat with his feet propped on the table, holding a cold beer even though it was only 11 a.m. He wore an expensive Stetson cowboy hat, yet his hands were pale and soft, hands that had never lifted a single piece of firewood. "Hey, sweetheart," Robert shouted toward the kitchen, his eyes still glued to a young waitress wiping down a table. "Joe from the real estate development company just called. He said if we sell the land now, he'll throw in a free Miami cruise. What do you think? Isn't it time to toss that filthy apron and start enjoying life?" Martha didn't answer. She simply hurled a log into the firebox, sparks exploding outward as a substitute for her rage. The restaurant door swung open. Kevin and Jessica walked in, bringing with them a blast of expensive perfume that overpowered even the smell of grilled meat. Kevin, 32, her only son, looked polished in a linen suit, but his eyes carried the exhaustion of someone worn out by sleepless nights of partying. He tossed his Porsche fob, a leased car, onto the table and complained, "Mom, is the air conditioner broken or what? It's freaking hot in here. I just came from meeting a partner. This shirt cost $500 and now it reeks of smoke. How am I supposed to meet investors like this?" Beside him stood Jessica, his white wife, with elaborately curled golden blonde hair. The moment she stepped inside, she covered her nose, grimacing as if she had smelled poison. Her face was unnaturally taut and shiny from excessive filler injections. She pulled out her phone and recorded an Instagram story, carefully choosing angles that avoided the smoke-blackened walls. "Oh my God," Jessica whined in a spoiled, nasally voice. "Kevin, I told you already. This place is an environmental disaster. Just imagine if we flattened it and put up a 3-story glass building. The first floor would be an organic cafe. The second and third floors would be my Zen yoga studio. We'd sell $15 celery juice instead of these greasy chunks of meat. That's lifestyle. That's the future." Kevin nodded in agreement, scrolling through his phone as crypto charts plunged downward. "Jessica's right, Mom. Who even eats roadside barbecue these days? You're sitting on a $5 million gold mine and you're working yourself like a slave. You need to sell it, split the money between Dad and me, and invest in something more profitable." Martha stepped out of the kitchen, a large meat cleaver in her hand, wiping sweat from her brow. She looked at the 3 people closest to her, a drunken, delusional husband, a debt-ridden son who loved to lecture others, and a vain daughter-in-law. "Listen," Martha's voice was low and sharp like a gunshot. 5 million or 50 million, I don't give a damn. This is my grandmother's legacy. As long as I'm breathing, this pit stays lit. You want money? Go wash dishes in the back, $15 an hour. Otherwise, shut your mouths and let me work. All three fell silent, but in Kevin's and Jessica's eyes, a cold calculation flickered. They knew they couldn't persuade this stubborn old woman with words. They needed another plan, crueler and far more legal. Everything began in a rented pet house overlooking the glittering Dallas skyline, where Kevin and Jessica were desperately trying to maintain a lavish lifestyle using credit cards that were already maxed out. That night, Jessica sprawled across an Italian leather sofa, swiping on her iPad. Her sharply lined eyes lit up as she pointed at a chart for a new cryptocurrency called Green Lunar. Kevin, look! The financial forums are going crazy over it. Elon Musk just hinted about a green moon in a tweet. Tonight, it's going to the moon. If we enter now with 100x leverage, we'll have enough money to outright buy the property for my yoga studio. No need to beg that stubborn old woman anymore. This is your last chance to prove you're a real Wolf of Wall Street, not a mama's boy. Her provocation struck Kevin right in his fragile ego. He wanted to escape his mother's shadow, to become a self-made millionaire overnight, but his funds were exhausted. In a frenzy of greed, Kevin did something insane. He approached a so-called private equity fund, which was actually a legal front for a high-end loan shark operation. He lied about owning the barbecue restaurant as collateral, signed loan documents with predatory interest rates and twisted legal clauses, and borrowed $500,000 in quick cash. Kevin went all in on a long position. He stared at the screen, his heart pounding as if it might burst out of his chest. But the crypto market has no mercy. Just 30 minutes after Kevin entered the trade, a classic rug pull occurred. The anonymous developer dumped everything. Green Lunar's value plunged straight down in a solid red line to absolute zero. $500,000 vanished in an instant. Kevin froze. The whiskey glass slipped from his hand and shattered across the floor. The next morning, there were no tattooed thugs with baseball bats smashing down the door like in the movies. America works in a far more terrifying way, through the law. The doorbell rang. A white man in a perfectly pressed Armani suit, leather briefcase in hand, politely handed Kevin a thick envelope stamped in red. He was the lender's attorney. "Good morning, Mr. Higgins," the lawyer said in a cold, robotic, professional tone. "My client regrets your loss. However, during our review, we discovered that you falsified information regarding land ownership to secure the loan. This constitutes federal-level wire fraud and securities fraud. If you fail to repay the full $500,000 plus penalties within 7 days, we will be forced to forward the case to the FBI and the SEC. You understand, of course, that the minimum sentence for these charges is 10 years in federal prison, with no possibility of parole." The door closed softly. Kevin collapsed onto the floor. In the United States, a federal prison sentence is the end of a citizen's life as they know it. He panicked completely, sweat pouring off him, and turned to see Jessica's face drained of all color. They both understood that their only path to survival now lay in Martha's pocket. The atmosphere in Martha's living room that night was thicker and more suffocating than even the hottest Texas summer day. Kevin sat curled up on the sofa, both hands clutching his head, trembling like a child who had committed an unforgivable crime. He couldn't bring himself to meet his mother's eyes. Robert and Jessica had prepared carefully for this performance. They brought home a lawyer named Sterling, a man who specialized in shady litigation, dressed in a flashy suit, wearing a permanent manufactured smile. Sterling placed his crocodile skin briefcase on the table, pulled out a thick stack of documents packed with legal jargon, and spoke gravely. Mrs. Higgins, the situation is extremely urgent. Your son, Kevin, foolishly listed this property as collateral on a loan application. The creditors are now suing. Under Texas civil asset forfeiture law, if Kevin is convicted of fraud, the government has the right to seize any asset connected to the suspect to compensate damages. That means Mama Smokehouse, this house, and that $5 million land parcel will be seized and auctioned off by the government as early as next week. At the words government and seizure, Martha's legs went weak. For a woman who had spent her entire life grilling meat, the American legal system was a terrifying monster she never wanted to deal with. Dear Lord, what should I do? I can't lose the restaurant. It's my life, Martha cried, her voice breaking in fear. Jessica seized the moment. She sat beside her, clasping her mother's hand with a face of false concern. Mom, Attorney Sterling found a loophole to save us. It's called an asset protection strategy. You need to transfer ownership of this house to an intermediary LLC immediately. On paper, you won't be the owner anymore, so the government won't be able to seize your assets to cover Kevin's debt. Sterling adjusted his glasses and added, That's correct. We'll set up something called Higgins Holdings, LLC. Kevin will be listed as the nominal director to legitimize the debt restructuring. This is only temporary. After 6 months, once Kevin's case is resolved, he'll sign the property back over to you. This is the only way to freeze the assets before a court order is issued. Robert took a drag from his cigar, exhaled a cloud of smoke, his voice heavy with pressure. Martha, what are you hesitating for? You want to cling to your name on the deed and watch Kevin rot in prison for 10 years while the cops shut this place down? He's your only son. Looking at her son sobbing in despair, and then at the lawyer's grave expression, the fear of losing both her child and her livelihood clouded Martha's judgment. She had no idea that civil asset forfeiture didn't work that simply, and that transferring assets to someone under litigation was in fact illegal asset concealment. But she trusted them. She believed this was her only lifeline. All right, I'll do it, as long as it saves Kevin and keeps the restaurant. Martha nodded weakly, officially stepping into the deadly trap laid by the people she loved most in the world. The next morning, Martha's old Ford F-150 pickup, steeped in the smell of charcoal smoke, looked painfully out of place among a row of luxury cars parked in front of a magnificent black glass high-rise in downtown Houston. She stepped into the elevator, her worn denim jacket and rough, calloused hands standing in stark contrast to the glamorous space, thick with the scent of money and elite privilege. Inside Sterling's law office on the 40th floor, the icy blast of the central air conditioning made Martha shiver. On the glossy mahogany desk lay a thick stack of documents, already clipped together, marked with bright yellow stickers wherever a signature was required. Sterling, wearing his professionally empty smile, slid the most important document toward her. Mrs. Higgins, this is the quitclaim deed. Legally speaking, this document confirms that you voluntarily relinquish all your interests in the land and the restaurant brand, transferring them to Higgins Holdings, LLC. This is a mandatory procedural step to sever the legal connection between you and the assets before the creditor's court order is issued. Martha picked up the heavy Mont Blanc pen, her hand trembling uncontrollably. She stared at the word grantor bearing her name and grantee listing that unfamiliar limited liability company. A suffocating sense of unease rose in her chest. 40 years of sweat and tears, 40 years standing by the fire pit. Were all her memories and honor now compressed into this thin sheet of paper? Seeing her hesitate, Jessica impatiently tapped her long, pointed nails against the glass tabletop. Tap, tap. "Mom, please hurry up. It's already 4:30. The county clerk's office closes at 5. If we don't get this recorded today, the asset freeze order goes into effect tomorrow morning, and then the police will come and put Kevin in handcuffs right at home. Do you really want to see that?" Kevin sat beside her, head lowered, sweat pouring down his face. His voice was quiet but urgent. "Mom, trust me, just 6 months. Attorney Sterling already promised. It's just paperwork." Martha looked at her trembling son. The image of little Kevin running around the smokehouse kitchen as a child flooded back, overwhelming all reason. She closed her eyes and swallowed her fear. "All right, I'll sign. For you, I'll do anything." The pen touched the paper. Each stroke of Martha's signature was shaky yet decisive. The moment she released the pen, the notary public seated beside her pressed an embossed seal onto the page. Stamp. The dry, cracking sound echoed through the silent room. It wasn't just the sound of a seal. It was the gavel of fate striking down, officially stripping Martha of all ownership over the only legitimate asset she had ever possessed. She exhaled deeply, believing she had saved her son, unaware that she had just signed her own death sentence, handing the blade to those waiting to stab her in the back. Just 48 hours after that fateful nod at the notary's office, tragedy struck in the most brutal and unmistakably American way possible, a 911 call. That morning, Martha was busy in the kitchen preparing marinade for a batch of baby back ribs when a sleek black limousine screeched to a stop outside. A man in a suit stepped out, shook Kevin's hand, and handed him a check. Through the window, Martha saw the number printed on it, $4 million. She rushed outside, still clutching her boning knife, shouting, "Kevin, what is going on? Why did you sell the land? We were only transferring it temporarily." Kevin stepped back, his face pale, unable to meet his mother's eyes. Jessica, however, did not flinch. She positioned herself in front of her husband. Her usual artificial smile was gone, replaced by the cold, venomous expression of a snake shedding its skin. "Old woman, there was never anything temporary about it. The land is sold. The development corporation just wired the cash. Kevin needs the money to pay his debts, and we need capital to start a new life in California. There's no place for you here anymore." Rage exploded inside Martha. She instinctively tightened her grip on the knife handle, purely a reflex of a lifelong cook, her voice shaking with fury. "You bastards! I sacrificed everything to keep you out of prison, and this is how you dare betray your own mother, Kevin?" Instantly, Jessica let out a piercing, theatrical scream that echoed through the entire block. "Help! She's trying to kill me! She has a knife! Kevin, call 911 now!" Less than 5 minutes later, police sirens tore through the quiet air. 2 patrol cars screeched to a halt. 4 officers stepped out, hands resting on their holsters. "Drop the knife. Hands up." Terrified, Martha let the knife fall to the ground. "No, you're misunderstanding. This is my house. I was cooking." The commanding officer stepped forward and asked for documentation. Jessica immediately handed over the notarized quitclaim deed and the registration papers for Higgins Holdings, LLC. "Officer, this is my husband's legal residence and business. This woman is my former mother-in-law. She transferred ownership to us and now has returned to threaten us, to burn down the restaurant, and just attempted to attack me with a knife. I was terrified. I filed for an emergency protective order this morning." The officer examined the papers. The listed owner, Higgins Holdings, LLC. Martha's name was nowhere to be found. In American law, property rights are absolute. He turned to Martha, his voice cold. "Ma'am, according to these documents, you have no legal right to reside here. The property owner is requesting that you leave. Additionally, due to allegations of armed threats, I'm enforcing a restraining order prohibiting you from approaching Mr. Kevin Higgins and Mrs. Jessica Higgins within a 100-yard radius. If you do not leave immediately, you will be arrested for trespassing and criminal threat." "But this is my restaurant. For 40 years Martha screamed in desperation, trying to rush inside to retrieve her family recipe book. Jessica blocked her path, smirking. "Stop right there. Everything in this building, from the smoker to that torn notebook, belongs to the LLC's assets. You're not allowed to take anything. That would be theft of corporate property." Martha turned to Kevin, silently begging for help, but her cowardly son had already turned away, pretending to scroll through his phone, leaving his wife and the police to deal with his mother. Under the pressure of drawn weapons and merciless law, Martha was escorted off the property. She stood on the burning concrete sidewalk, wearing only grease-stained clothes. No money, no phone, no home. The officer pointed down the street. "Leave now. If I see you within a 100-yard radius again, you will be handcuffed and taken into custody immediately. This is your final warning." The doors of Mama's Smokehouse slammed shut. A closed sign was hung up. Martha stood frozen amid the rushing traffic of prosperous America, realizing she had just become homeless on the very land she had built with her own blood and bones. Dragging her heavy feet beyond the restricted zone, Martha collapsed onto a bus stop bench, her hands trembling as she searched her jacket pockets for spare change to use a payphone. In her mind, only one shred of hope remained. Robert. Lazy and alcoholic as he was, they had been married for over 40 years. She believed he wouldn't let her sleep on the streets. But when she called Robert's cell phone, only a cold voicemail answered. Refusing to give up, she walked 5 miles to a rundown Motel 6 on the outskirts of town, the place he frequented for gambling whenever he was angry with her. As soon as she entered the parking lot, she froze. Robert was standing there beside an Uber with its trunk open. He wasn't wearing his usual rumpled pajamas. Instead, he was dressed in a polished cream-colored suit, a brand-new cowboy hat perched on his head, an expensive Cuban cigar between his lips. Beside him sat 2 brand-new Louis Vuitton suitcases. "Robert, where are you going?" "Kevin and Jessica, they threw me out. You have to go back and talk sense into them." Martha rushed toward him, her voice breaking. Robert turned around, unsurprised. He adjusted his tie and looked at Martha with a mix of pity and contempt, the gaze of a man who had just hit the jackpot. "Oh, come on, Martha, stop making a scene. The cards are already on the table. Kevin's finished selling the land, and he's a good, considerate son, far more than you give him credit for." He patted his chest pocket where a checkbook bulged. "He transferred $1 million to me as a retirement fee. In Texas, we follow community property law. Technically, I was entitled to half of that restaurant, but I agreed to take $1 million in cash for a clean, quick exit and let you two sort out the rest." Martha stood frozen, her ears ringing. You knew their plan from the beginning. You sold your own wife for $1 million? Robert shrugged casually and pulled a white envelope from his pocket, tossing it onto a nearby trash can. "Divorce papers. My lawyer filed them this morning on the grounds of irreconcilable differences. Sign them and mail them back to the court. I'm not even asking for alimony. I'm generous like that." A red convertible sports car pulled up. A very young blonde woman in revealing clothes sat behind the wheel, chewing gum loudly. "Hey, Daddy, hurry up or we'll miss the flight to Vegas." Robert grinned and turned to deliver his final words to the woman who had stood by him for decades. "Goodbye, Martha. I'm sick of the smoke clinging to you. I'm heading to Las Vegas. That's where life is, not that damn grill." He climbed into the car, the engine roared, and the vehicle sped away, leaving Martha standing alone in the empty parking lot beside the divorce envelope. This blow cut deeper than any knife. She hadn't just lost her home or her son. Her only life partner had sold her out to chase the illusion of youth. That night, for the first time in her life, Mama Higgins curled up on a cold park bench, covering herself with old newspapers filled with stories about the distant, unreachable American dream. 3 weeks after being driven out of her home, Martha had tasted every layer of cruelty at the bottom of American society. She slept on a cold metal bunk bed at a Salvation Army shelter, lining up from 5 in the evening just to receive a thin bowl of soup and a place to lie down, surrounded by addicts and the sick. But Texas blood running through her veins did not allow her to collapse. She looked down at her left ring finger, where a 14K gold wedding band still rested, the only remaining relic of a 40-year marriage that was now dead. She clenched her teeth and walked into Easy Cash Pawn Shop. $200, no bargaining, the shop owner said bluntly. Martha nodded and took the $200, an almost laughably small amount of startup capital. But to her, it was a ticket back into the game. She went to an auto junkyard on the edge of the city where she found Mr. Ramirez, a Mexican immigrant who used to be a regular customer at her restaurant years ago. "Martha, my God, what happened to you?" Ramirez exclaimed when he saw the once legendary barbecue queen in such a broken state. After hearing her story, Ramirez pointed to a corner of the yard where a 1980 Chevrolet food truck sat rusted through, its tires flat, its engine completely dead. "It's scrap metal. It doesn't run anymore, but the kitchen inside can still work, barely. I can sell it for scrap for $500, but since it's you, take it. Pay me back when you can." Martha used her $200 to hire a tow truck to drag the wrecked food truck to a desolate, empty lot wedged between a heavy industrial zone and abandoned railroad tracks. There were no tourists here, no office workers, only dock laborers, welders, long-haul truck drivers, manual workers who were always starving but always broke. With no money for a proper smoker, Martha wandered construction sites asking for discarded 55-gallon oil drums. Using only a hammer and chisel, she turned them into makeshift ugly drum smokers. She scavenged fallen oak and mesquite branches from nearby woods for firewood. On the first Monday morning, the familiar white smoke rose once again from the wasteland. No signboard, no LED lights, just red paint scrawled clumsily across the rusted truck. Mama's back. The smell of smoked meat blended with the signature wood smoke and drifted for miles on the wind. Passing truck drivers began sniffing the air. Workers chewing dry sandwiches began to look around. One person stopped, then 2, then 10. "This flavor," an old trucker said, biting into a charred rib, sauce dripping into his beard. "My God, this is Mama Higgins' barbecue from downtown. I thought you retired." Martha stood inside the cramped, blistering hot truck, sweat pouring down her face, and smiled. "As long as I'm not dead, I'm not retired. Eat up, today's promo, buy one, get one free for drivers." Rumors of a ghost barbecue hidden in an industrial junkyard spread among blue-collar workers like an urban legend. Martha was back, not as a landowner, but as a warrior of flavor. Amid the suffocating heat and dust of the industrial zone, a gleaming Tesla Cybertruck pulling up in front of Martha's rusted food truck looked wildly out of place. Stepping out was Brody King, the most famous food reviewer on TikTok with 20 million followers. Brody was known for roasting luxury restaurants while glorifying street food made with soul. He lined up patiently like any other truck driver. When his turn came, he ordered the Texas Trinity: brisket, ribs, and sausage. Martha, unaware of who the man filming on his phone was, simply piled the tray high with meat, drowned it in sauce, and said curtly, "Careful, it's hot." Brody took the tray and sat on an old coil of electrical cable. He turned on the camera and lifted the brisket toward the lens. The meat trembled, impossibly tender, surrounded by a perfect pink smoke ring. "Look at this," Brody said to the camera. "I'm sitting in a junkyard eating barbecue cooked in an oil drum, but this smoke ring, it's more beautiful than anything I've ever seen in Michelin-star restaurants." He took a bite. His expression shifted from curiosity to shock. A censored curse slipped out in pure awe. "Holy shit, this tastes like heaven!" After finishing, Brody walked back toward the truck where Martha was scrubbing the grill. "Ma'am, I'm Brody King. I've eaten barbecue all over America, but I've never tasted anything like this. Why is someone this talented cooking in a dump like this? Who are you?" The question struck an unhealed wound. Martha stopped. Her aged eyes welled with tears. She didn't scream or cry. She pulled a crumpled piece of paper from her apron, the restraining order, and held it up to the camera. "My name is Mama Higgins. I ran a restaurant in downtown for 40 years, but my son and daughter-in-law tricked me into signing away my property to cover gambling debts, then called the police to throw me out with this paper. They banned me from coming within 100 yards of my own home. I had nowhere else to go, so I came here." She looked straight into the lens, her voice trembling but proud. "They took my house, they took my land, they even took my restaurant's name. But they forgot one thing: they can't take the smoke from my hands. As long as I'm standing, the real Mama Smokehouse is right here on this junk truck." The video was uploaded to TikTok at 2 p.m. with the title, "Kicked Out by Her Own Son, Barbecue Legend Reborn in a Junkyard. This Story Will Make You Cry." The explosion was immediate. 1 million views in 1 hour, 10 million in 5 hours, 50 million within 24 hours. America, a nation that worships individualism yet despises injustice and betrayal, erupted. The hashtag Justice for Mama shot to #1 on Twitter X. Internet sleuth quickly uncovered Kevin and Jessica's identities, along with the old downtown barbecue location, now shuttered and awaiting demolition. Thousands of furious comments flooded Jessica's social media. "You snake! Give the house back! Boycott her witch yoga studio!" But more powerful than outrage was support. The next morning, when Martha pulled her truck into the lot, she was stunned. Hundreds of cars stretched for miles. People came from Dallas, Houston, Austin. Some held signs reading, "We love Mama." A GoFundMe launched by Brody King raised $200,000 overnight to help her buy new equipment. Standing on the truck bed, gazing at the sea of people, Martha wept. These were not tears of humiliation, but of rebirth. She realized that in America, justice doesn't always come from courtrooms. Sometimes it comes from the power of the community. The power of the internet transformed a barren junkyard into Texas's newest tourist hotspot. Local police had to assign 2 patrol units just to direct traffic as lines of cars waiting for barbecue stretched 3 miles long, clogging the entire industrial entrance. Even after hiring 10 additional kitchen workers, Martha couldn't keep up with demand. In the midst of this storm of success, a civilian helicopter landed on a sun-scorched field nearby, blasting dust into the air. Stepping out was Alex Thorne, a legendary Silicon Valley venture capitalist known for turning wild ideas into billion-dollar unicorns. Alex didn't wait in line. He walked straight up to Martha with a full team of lawyers and assistants. "Mrs. Higgins," Alex said, holding a half-eaten rib, "I didn't fly from California just for this meat, though it's incredible. I came for your story. In America, people don't just buy products, they buy the American dream, and you are its purest living example, knocked down, standing back up, fighting again. I want to invest." Unlike Kevin's empty promises, Alex laid down a clear term sheet, numbers spelled out line by line. He injected $2 million in cash for 20% equity, and more importantly, brought the most formidable legal team in the country to protect her. His first move was registering a global trademark under a new name, Mama's Justice Barbecue. The logo showed Martha holding tongs, standing tall like the Statue of Liberty with her torch. Within 6 months, Mama's Justice Barbecue was no longer a rusted truck. A 10,000-square-foot flagship restaurant opened in downtown Austin. Then, franchises expanded into Los Angeles, New York, and Chicago. Bottles of Martha's barbecue sauce, her warm face printed on the label, appeared on shelves at Whole Foods and Walmart across America. The slogan on the bottle became a cultural catchphrase: "Tasted like revenge, sweet like justice." Forbes featured Martha on the cover of a special issue on self-made women. Financial analysts estimated her brand value and net worth had surpassed $10 million. Martha no longer slept in shelters. She bought a large ranch outside the city, raised horses, and grew organic vegetables. Yet every weekend, people still saw the female millionaire tying on an apron, standing by the smoker at the flagship store, serving customers with her own hands. She proved to America that age is just a number, and betrayal can sometimes be the best fuel to ignite the fire of success. While the empire of Mama's Justice BBQ was rising brilliantly, darkness began to descend over the fake, glittering lives of those who had betrayed her. Jessica, handcuffs, and the nightmare called the IRS. Early Tuesday morning at the rented mansion in Beverly Hills, where Jessica and Kevin had moved to live the so-called California dream, violent pounding shook the door at 5 a.m. "Open up, federal agents, we have a search warrant." Jessica, still sleeping in silk pajamas, stumbled out in panic and froze as dozens of agents wearing windbreakers marked IRS-CI, Internal Revenue Service Criminal Investigation, and FBI flooded into the house. It turned out that in an attempt to secretly move the $4 million from the land sale so she wouldn't have to share it with Kevin and to evade taxes, Jessica had routed the money through a web of offshore shell companies. But she had underestimated the American financial surveillance system. "Jessica Higgins, you are under arrest for federal tax evasion, money laundering, and wire fraud." The sight of Jessica in handcuffs, bare-faced, pale, being escorted into a vehicle while paparazzi, the very photographer she once hired, fired their cameras non-stop to capture the shocking arrest, was the cruelest punishment imaginable for a woman who lived for appearances. Her bank accounts were completely frozen. Overnight, she went from millionaire to penniless inmate. Kevin, fentanyl hallucinations, and a destroyed brain. While his wife was being arrested, Kevin knew nothing about it. He was lost in a debauched party at an underground nightclub in Los Angeles. Crushed by his wife's contempt and tormented by guilt toward his mother, Kevin turned to drugs for escape. That night, a dealer handed Kevin a blue pill, claiming it was a strong painkiller. In reality, it was counterfeit, laced with fentanyl, the deadly drug killing thousands of Americans every year. Minutes after swallowing it, Kevin began foaming at the mouth, his eyes rolling back as he collapsed onto the floor, convulsing. His so-called friends panicked and fled, leaving him to die on the cold ground. By sheer luck, paramedics arrived in time and injected Narcan. Kevin survived, but due to prolonged oxygen deprivation to the brain, hypoxia, he suffered permanent brain damage. Once a healthy adult, he became slow, vacant, his hands and legs trembling uncontrollably, his cognition reduced to that of a 10-year-old child. With no insurance coverage, the hospital discharged him back onto the streets. Robert, a bitter ending in Las Vegas. In the gambling capital of Las Vegas, Robert woke up in a luxury hotel suite after a night of heavy drinking. He reached beside him, searching for his new bride, Candy, a seductive dancer 40 years younger than him. The bed was empty. Groaning, his head pounding, Robert staggered up and opened the room safe. Empty. The cash, the Rolex watches, and most importantly, the checkbook containing the entire $1 million he had brought with him, everything was gone. On the table lay only a hurried note written in lipstick. "Thanks for the ride, Grandpa. Bye." He frantically called the bank, only to hear the cold response. "Your account has been completely withdrawn this morning by the co-account holder, your wife, Mrs. Candy Higgins." Candy, it turned out, was a professional con artist. She had lured Robert into a lightning-fast Vegas chapel wedding solely to gain access to the joint account, then vanished. With his credit cards declined, Robert was thrown out of the hotel. He stood under the neon lights of the Las Vegas Strip, not a dollar to his name, no home, no family. He became one of the countless homeless souls drifting through the city of sin, scavenging loose coins tossed by tourists into fountain basins. In America, when someone falls to the very bottom, vultures are always circling, waiting to feed. For Jessica, that vulture was Leonard Wolfe, a notorious ambulance-chasing lawyer known for absurd yet relentless lawsuits. Jessica was released on bail after borrowing money from loan sharks, but all her assets were frozen. Desperate and unhinged, she searched frantically for quick cash. When she saw a news segment about Martha's BBQ empire on television, her greedy eyes lit up again. She tracked down Kevin wandering in the slums, mentally ruined after his overdose, and dragged him into Wolfe's office. "Listen," Wolfe said, rolling a gold pen between his fingers as his cunning eyes scanned the files. "Your former mother-in-law now owns a $10 million brand. Under Texas law, that BBQ sauce recipe was developed during her marriage to Robert Higgins. That makes it potentially marital intellectual property. Moreover, Kevin is a legal heir under the old will. We can sue her for misappropriation of trade secrets and breach of fiduciary duty." "But we were the ones who kicked her out," Kevin muttered, drool slipping from the corner of his mouth as he struggled to form a rare coherent sentence. Jessica slapped Kevin lightly on the cheek. "Shut up, you useless idiot. This is our only chance not to starve." Then she turned to Wolfe. "You're sure we'll win, right?" "In America, justice belongs to whoever has the better lawyer. That old woman is just a cook. What does she know about IP law? We'll demand $50 million in damages. I take 40% as a contingency fee." 1 week later, inside the packed Mama's Justice BBQ restaurant, a process server walked in and handed Martha a thick stack of documents. "Martha Higgins, you are being sued. This is your summons." Martha opened the file. What leapt out at her were shameless accusations bordering on the absurd. Kevin and Jessica were suing her for stealing the family's secret BBQ recipe to enrich herself and for causing emotional distress to her children. Customers murmured anxiously. Alex Thorne, her investor, rushed over. "Martha, this is serious. U.S. IP law is extremely complex. If they prove the recipe was created while you were married to Robert, we could be forced to split 50% of the profits." But contrary to everyone's fear, Martha showed no panic. She looked at the summons, then out the window where the American flag waved. She remembered the sleepless nights 20 years ago spent in public libraries, secretly studying how to protect herself from a drunken husband. She folded the paper and smiled mysteriously, the smile of someone holding the final Joker card. "Let them sue," she said calmly. "I've been waiting for this day for 20 years. Call our lawyers, Alex. I want them to see me in court. I'm going to teach them one final lesson about what ownership really means." The legal battle began, promising a shocking courtroom reckoning in federal court where naked truth would be exposed under the light of justice. The U.S. District Court for the Southern District of Texas was packed with reporters that day. The case, Higgins versus Higgins, became a media sensation, symbolizing the clash between traditional values and modern greed. On the plaintiff's side, Jessica, out on temporary bail, wore heavy makeup to hide her gaunt face, sitting beside Kevin, who stared vacantly, his limbs trembling from brain damage. Attorney Wolf opened with a dramatic speech painting Martha as a tyrannical mother who had stolen the BBQ sauce formula, what he called the family's shared intellectual legacy, to enrich herself while abandoning her sick, starving children. "Your Honor," Wolf said, pointing at Kevin, drooling quietly, "look at this victim. He lost everything because his mother stole his future. We demand that Martha Higgins surrender 50% of the company's shares and pay $50 million in damages." Then it was Martha's turn to take the stand. She did not wear a business suit like a corporate executive. She wore a pristine white chef's coat embroidered with the Mama's Justice logo. In her hands was an old, battered leather notebook. Her lawyer, one of the nation's top intellectual property experts hired by Alex, asked, "Mrs. Higgins, who created the famous black gold BBQ sauce recipe?" Martha looked straight at Jessica and Kevin, her voice calm yet echoing through the courtroom. "I did. I created it in 1980 in my mother's kitchen, 5 years before I married Robert Higgins." Wolf shot to his feet. "Objection! Self-serving testimony without evidence. Under Texas law, property created during marriage is community property." Martha smiled. She opened the notebook and pulled out a yellow document carefully laminated. "This is my copyright registration and trade secret affidavit filed with the U.S. Library of Congress in 1980. The registrant's name is—" The courtroom erupted in gasps. Wolf turned pale, but the knockout punch had not yet landed. Martha produced another thick folder, the land sale contract Kevin and Jessica had signed with the real estate corporation for the quick $4 million payout. "And one more thing," Martha said, her eyes sharp as scalpels. "When you sold the old restaurant land out of greed, you failed to read the fine print on page 45. To receive the full $4 million in immediate cash, you signed a non-compete agreement. It states that the seller, Higgins Holdings, LLC, under Kevin's name, agrees to not engage in, own, or be associated with any BBQ-related business for 50 years within a 500-mile radius to avoid competition with the developer's new food district." Martha closed the folder. The sound was dry, final, like a coffin lid snapping shut. "So, Your Honor, by suing me for ownership of a BBQ brand, the plaintiffs are effectively confessing to a breach of contract with the real estate corporation. Not only do they have no claim against me, but they should prepare themselves. The corporation is waiting outside to sue them for breach of contract." The judge slammed the gavel. "Case dismissed with prejudice. Plaintiffs are ordered to pay all court costs and damages for defamation." Jessica collapsed into her chair, her face drained of all color. Kevin simply giggled vacantly, unaware that his life had officially ended. After the trial, the villain's fates collapsed exactly as dictated by America's unforgiving social reality. Robert. His unclaimed body was buried in a public cemetery for the poor on the outskirts of Las Vegas, a lonely end for a man who spent his life chasing empty pleasures. Jessica, convicted of tax evasion, money laundering, and now crushed by massive court-ordered debts, she received a 5-year federal prison sentence. Inside, the once arrogant influencer learned brutal lessons in humility from fellow inmates. And finally, Kevin. 3 months after the trial, Los Angeles, Skid Row, the hell on earth of America's homeless and addicted. Amid torn tents and the stench of urine and garbage, a black Rolls-Royce Phantom slowly rolled in. The door opened and Martha stepped out. She wore sunglasses but could not hide the pain in her eyes as she looked at her son. Kevin sat on the ground in rags, most of his teeth gone from meth abuse, digging through a trash bin for leftovers. He had become a true street zombie. "Kevin?" she called. He looked up, his eyes dull and empty, taking a moment to recognize her. He lunged forward, clutching her legs, sobbing hysterically. "Mom, give me money. Take me home. I'm starving. I'm dying." A bodyguard moved to intervene, but Martha raised her hand to stop him. She did not kneel to hug her son. She did not cry. She reached into her purse and pulled out, not cash, but a bus ticket and a business card. "I've prepaid 1 year of rehab at the Last Chance Recovery Camp in Arizona. It's a place of iron discipline, hard labor, no phones, no freedom." She dropped the ticket and card at Kevin's feet. "This is the last asset I will ever give you. If you get clean and survive 1 year, come find me. I'll give you a job, washing dishes at the restaurant, minimum wage, $15 an hour. You'll pay your own rent. You'll buy your own food." Kevin trembled as he picked up the ticket. "You won't take me back to the mansion. You're a millionaire, Mom." Martha turned and walked toward the luxury car. Her shadow stretched long, lonely, yet unshakable like a mountain. Without turning back, she said, her voice cold yet carrying life's hardest lesson. "In this country, there are no free lunches, my son. The American dream belongs only to those who are sober and willing to work. Die free here or live through discipline. The choice is yours." The Rolls-Royce drove away, leaving Kevin screaming amid the trash. He watched the car disappear, then looked down at the crumpled bus ticket in his hand. Around him, other drug-ravaged figures shuffled closer. Kevin clenched his jaw, struggled to his feet, and limped toward the bus station. It was the first step of a real human being after 32 years of living as a parasite.